underway in just a couple of moments. It's Jamie Clark. It's Monbulk versus Rock, and we're underway. Sophie Stubbs already with ball in hand. It comes back to Clark. Stubbs finds Ferguson, looking for Perry Reid. 317 goals for this season, and she's already going to get a look inside the first minute, Perry Reid, and she makes no mistake. So first goal going the way of the Hawks. And Leah Mybus with her first centre pass out wide to Pastrenia. Goes back to Mybus. Presenting nicely was Stacey. Lost control of the ball, but she got it back and goes long, and Whitworth did well, got front position and knocks it away. Stays with Rock though. Mybus to Stacey, who levels the score. So 1 goal apiece early days in the match of the round. So once again, Clark, Ferguson, Stubbs. Goes back to Ferguson. Reid calls for it and controls it nicely at the back, Perry Reid. And she converts her second goal for the afternoon. So good start here for Monbulk. Pretty clean. Their centre passes. Pastrenia lost control of the ball. And just coughed it straight up. Beautifully read there by Maguire. Goes short to Pastrenia. She goes back to Henry. Henry retreats back. That was to James. Mitzi Henry once again goes out wide. Maguire, long pass to Mybus. And Mybus unable to find Gemma Stacey. The ball trickles out of play. Paige Whitworth can get Monbulk moving out of defence. She's got Scott Thomas as a short option, but goes out wide to McDowell, who faked. And now we'll come back to Whitworth. Whitworth, short, good one. Scott Thomas, Clark. Retreats back to Whitworth. Gets moving further. A court this time to Scott Thomas. Now she finds McDowell. Scott Thomas again. Being corralled pretty nicely at the moment. Works out eventually to Clark. She comes back to McDowell, who can put him inside the tackle third. Got it away just in time. Henry, though, really nicely done. Clever interception. She finds Pastrenia. Pastrenia goes short to Maguire. Mybus looks for Davey and gets it to her. And Courtney Davey can level the scores. Unable to convert. So McDowell gets them moving out of defence to Scott Thomas. Goes back to McDowell, laterally to Whitworth. Scott Thomas again is involved, finds Ferguson. Long pass, Stubbs got up at the right time, and she gets it to Perry Reid. Really nice counter-attacking play there by Monbulk. Counter-attacking play, and they get the margin out to 2 goals. Stubbs, straight to Ferguson. Ferguson, back to Stubbs. And Perry Reid, can she keep it in play? No, she can't. And a reprieve for the Rock defence. So Ella James has Mitzi Henry short, but goes further to Maguire. Looks at Mybus, comes back to Henry. She'll go laterally to James. Over the top to Mybus once again. Here is Stacey. Ella James looks at Pastrenia. Stacey, Mybus. Grace Scott Thomas. And she converts. So back to a 1 goal difference. Leah Mybus has the centre pass. Oh, beautifully done by Jamie Clark. Wasted no time. Ferguson, McDowell, and then back to Ferguson. A couple of 1-2s between those two. So McDowell. Right on a measure here at the edge of the attacking third. So Steph Ferguson at the top of the goal circle. And little introductory there from Maddie Blanchard. Joining the call for the first time today. Perry Reid converts 4 goals to 2. And once again, Monbulk have a break. Good to see Maddie up here today. Nice chilly one. Ferguson, McDowell did nicely. Steph Ferguson, Reid has got it. She's having a really good start to this game, and she converts another goal. Takes the tally out to 322 for the season. Nicely done there, Maguire, Strenia. And Whitworth did well, just got a hand in. Mybus, nicely done. That's a good feed to Courtney Davey. And she gets one back for Rock. So they cut the margin back to 2 goals, but still a little bit of work to do for the Kangaroos. Ferguson goes back to Clark. Looks at Ferguson, then goes further to Perry Reid, who's controlled that nice. It wasn't the most favourable for Clark. Maybe for Ferguson, no. Laterally to Stubbs. Again, Ferguson. Stubbs and Steph Ferguson. Does she line them up? No. Again, straight to her trusted shooter, Perry Reid, and she converts another goal, and again extends that margin back out to 3. Mibus, knocked away by Woodworth, but had away contact from Stacey. Stacey, Scott Thomas did well. Repels the initial attack. Leah Mibus. Good one, good feed. And that'll work out. Davey converts. So Monbulk went away too quickly, just yet a rock. Clark, Stubbs, looks at Ferguson. That's where she'll go. Maguire can't cut it off. It was a well-weighted pass, and Reed's going to get another one. Just had the height advantage on Henry. She converts another goal. Again, back out to 3 goals the difference. Mibus, Pastrenia. And waits, and she's coughed it straight up to Whitworth. It wastes on McDowell. Here is Stubbs. McDowell, though. Short one to Scott Thomas. Comes back to McDowell. Over the top to Stubbs. Who can put him inside the attacking third, and that's where she goes. Finds Ferguson. Back to Stubbs. Puts it up, and oh no, the defence have muddled this up. It's going to go out of play, and Henry and James both got a hand to it, and Monbulk will maintain possession. Ferguson at the front. Henry, cleverly done. She's done enough. Couple of good interceptions by Mitzi Henry. Gets it back. Nicely done. Back to Maguire. Mibus. Looks around. Stacey. Doesn't quite convert. And Gemma Stacey converts, and it's a bit of an ordeal for Rock, but they keep it back to a 2-goal difference. Clark. Was a little unsure where to go. McDowell. Scott Thomas on the starts. Nearly cut off, but I think a call for a strike the transverse line there by the umpire against Courtney Davey. Ferguson might have her first look for the afternoon at goal, and she makes no mistake, gets it back out to a 3-goal difference. 8 goals to 5 the way of Monbulk. Mibus to Pastrenia. Comes all the way back to Maguire. Laterally to Henry. Finds Leah Mibus. Davey calls for it out wide. She is honoured. Pastrenia. And Stacey, clever one-handed collect. It was a good feed, and she converts the goal. And they stay within touching distance to Rock. Ferguson got it from Clark. Comes back to Scott Thomas. Ferguson again is involved. Stubbs, Reed will get it out the back. Cleverly done. Doesn't convert, but Steph Ferguson rebounds off the post, and she does convert. Gets her second goal for the afternoon, and again just gets that bit of breathing room for the Hawks. 9 goals to 6. Mibus in fact to Pastrenia. Stacey back to Mibus. Waits, and cleverly done by Scott Thomas. Well read out of Leah Mibus's hands. So this will come back to Whitworth. McDowell. Scott Thomas. Back to McDowell. Stubbs now is involved. Ferguson called for a little bit further to Clark. Stubbs. Short one. Ferguson a little bit rocky, but it worked out in the end. And Steph Ferguson doesn't convert. Ray did well. Again, just seems to have that height advantage on Mitzi Henry. Got to it first and extends this margin out to 4 goals. So now they're starting to get a bit of a break here on Monbulk. Stubbs. High and long pass, and that one had way too much on it. And the Rock defence will get a reprieve. Henry. Does well to Mibus, held strong. Davey onto Pastrenia. And finds Gemma Stacey, who can cut the margin back to 3 goals, and she does just that. So back-to-back goals for Rock. Just when Monbulk are going to start running away. They've done pretty well. Mibus. Long feed. It's a good feed as well. Stacey finds another goal and gets it back to 2 goals the difference. So Monbulk's turn to respond. Ferguson receiving it from Clark. Goes back to McDowell. Short one to Stubbs. Out wide to Clark. Comes back to Sophie Stubbs. Just received contact from Maguire. Found Ferguson. She goes all the way back to Clark. Again feeds to Ferguson. And Steph Ferguson finds another goal. 9 goals to 10. Or 8 goals to... 8 goals to 11, sorry, in fact. Mibus, Henry. Pastrenia. And that's a nice feed to Courtney Davey. And eventually it rolls in. So they get it back to 2 goals. And this has been a good fight from the Kangaroos in this first quarter. Up against pretty strong opposition. They're certainly up for the fight. Here is Perry Reid. And she gets another goal. Gets it back to 3 goals the difference. And Maguire was up against it against Clark, but she's done well enough. It comes back into the hands of Mitzi Henry. Finds Mybus. Over the head of Pastrenia. Oh, kept in play by Davey Whitworth. Didn't know. It was her ball to collect. Davey got to the fall of the ball and converts the goal. So back to 2 goals the difference. And here we go. Rock on the counter-attack again. Henry called for it, went further to Mybus. Into the hands of Pastrenia again. Short one to Stacey. She got contact from Whitworth. Short feed to Davey. She converts it back to 1 goal the difference. And Rock right up for this challenge. Mybus out wide to Davey. Finds Maguire. Mybus was a hot feed, but she made it work. Could go to Davey. That's where she goes. Stacey, Whitworth. Well done, Whitworth. It's good interception by Whitworth because Rock were coming in hot. And they do have the momentum at the moment, the Kangaroos. McDowell out wide to Scott Thomas. Nearly cut off by Davey. Just couldn't quite finish off the job. And become quite a physical contest, it has to be said as well. Stubbs could go to Scott Thomas, but goes further to Clark. Reid is going to get this one, and can she find a steadier for the Hawks? No, maybe. The duty will fall on Steph Ferguson. It will. She will feed to Perry Reid, who does convert. Gets it back to 2 goals the difference. And that's a handy steadier for Monbulk. Rock were coming. Stubbs, Clark. Reid again. This for back-to-back goals, and she's got it. And just like that, Monbulk get that breathing room back. So now it's Rock's turn to respond. Mybus was cut up by Stubbs, and lateral pass to Pastrenia has not worked out. Good pressure by the Monbulk defence. McDowell to Scott Thomas. Scott Thomas comes inboard. Nicely done. McDowell, high and long feed, but it works to Clark. She'll go shorter to Ferguson. Looked at Reid, but decided to come back to Liam Ibis. Ferguson. And she's taken too long. So an opportunity for Rock to counter-attack. James, short one to Henry. Another shorter one to Maguire. Comes back to James, right on her measure here. Maguire, Mybus, looks at Pastrenia, eventually gets it to her. Oh, no, beautifully cut up by Whitworth, and she kept it in play. So McDowell comes back to Whitworth. She goes back to McDowell. Whitworth for a third time in the passage. Much longer one this time to Stubbs. Comes inboard, and that worked out beautifully to Scott Thomas. On to Ferguson, and Reid eventually gets it under her control and gets it out to a 4-goal difference. Very nice enough by Monbulk. And they've regained the ascendancy in this contest. Ferguson out wide. Good one to Clark. Ferguson. Clark again is involved. And she'll just go short to Steph Ferguson. Won't have a look at goal, but I think she will now, and yes. And she converts out to a 5-goal difference. And a little bit disappointing this for Rock. They were just about to level the scores a few minutes ago, and now Monbulk have pushed it out to a 5-goal difference. Maguire onto Pastrenia. Stacey eventually retreats to Mybus. She retreats to Henry. Henry calls for Mybus to come at her, and that's a good long feed to Davey. And Rock desperately need this one, and Davey gets it for him. So back to a 4-goal difference. Clark with the centre pass. Out wide. High and long feed is not a good one. Falls out of play. Ella James short to Henry. Another short one to Maguire. Cut off beautifully though by Perry Reid. Good defensive work by the goal shooter. Comes back to Perry Reid. She goes out wide. She'll get this back out to a 5-goal difference, and she does. 12 goals to 17. Mybus back to Henry. And that'll do us for quarter time in the Rochford Wines match of the round. In a relatively high scoring affair, it has to be said. 17 goals to 12 are the way of the Hawks. We'll have... And welcome back to second quarter action of the Rochford Wines match of the round, round 9 between Monbulk and Rock. And we are underway. Jamie Clark again with centre pass duties and waste no time to Ferguson. He went to Stubbs, then back to Clark. Stubbs. Good feed and Perry Reid in position nice and early in this second quarter, and she can push this margin out to 6 goals, and she does. Good start from Monbulk, early days in the second. So Leah Mybus again with centre pass duties. Mybus, Stacey. Leah Mybus, Mitzi Henry, and Mybus and Whitworth's cut it off, and Monbulk on the counter attack. Scott Thomas goes wide. Whitworth, Scott Thomas. Ferguson is involved. Stubbs. Long one to Ferguson. And feeds to Perry Reid, who can make this a 7-goal difference, and she does. 19 goals to 12. And they're starting to get a run on here, Monbulk. Jamie Clark's got the centre pass. The margin is 7 goals. Ferguson probably wasn't the most favourable pass, that one. Henry, short one to Maguire, finds Pastrenia. Mybus. And she's taken too long, Leah Mybus, so it's going to come back for the Hawks. Whitworth looks at Scott Thomas, goes short to Wilson. Stubbs. Scott Thomas. Stubbs again to Ferguson. Just shorts to Sophie Stubbs, and she finds Steph Ferguson and feeds it over the top to Reid, and she's got another one. 12 goals to 20. 8 goals the difference, biggest lead of the game so far. Pastrenia over the top to Stacey, and nice one there to O'Kelly, who converts, gets one back for Rock. So Clark, Ferguson, Stubbs, goes out wide to Clark, looks for Reid, decides against that for the moment. Stubbs, fumble, but recovered. Ball trickles out of play, and it should stay with Monbulk for the moment. So both defenders taken out of the contest, and Steph Ferguson gets it back out to an 8-goal difference. Mybus with centre pass duties, finds O'Kelly over the top to Pastrenia. Knocked away momentarily by Wilson. Pastrenia. Long one, too long for Stacey. Whitworth tries to exit defence for Monbulk. She finds Clark. Short to Scott Thomas. Here is Stubbs. Ferguson. Good lateral pass to Clark. Wants to come inboard to Stubbs. Comes all the way back to Scott Thomas. Goes back to Stubbs. Maguire's given away contact. Ferguson pops it over the top for Reid. And she can make this a 9-goal difference, and she does. 22 goals to 13. So Rock and exit. Henry wasted no time. O'Kelly finds Mybus. Wants Stacey. Gets it to her eventually. And Gemma Stacey gets one back for Rock, and they needed that one. So they get it back to 8 goals the difference. Leah Mybus has the centre pass. Out to Pastrenia. Short to O'Kelly. Mybus again is involved. Here is O'Kelly. Pastrenia controlled it nicely. And feeds to Gemma Stacey. Can she make this back-to-back goals for Rock? Yes, she can. 22 goals to 15. The way of Monbulk. Stubbs waits and goes short, and that'll work out just fine to Clark. She goes back to Stubbs, finds Ferguson. She finds Reid. And Perry Reid gets it back out to 8 goals the difference, 15 to 23. So O'Kelly receiving it from Pastrana. She finds Stacey. Gemma Stacey, good feed. Finds Lily O'Kelly. Knocked away by Scott Thomas. So O'Kelly gets a second look, and this time she converts. Cuts it back down to 7 goals of difference, but still a lot of work to do for Rock. They've really been blown away a bit this second quarter. Ferguson, clever collect. She'll get it back from Clark, Steph Ferguson, and this time she converts. Back to that 8 goal difference, 24 goals to 16, the way of the Hawks. Good one to O'Kelly. Comes all the way back to Henry, looks at Mybus, and eventually that's where she goes. Mybus eventually feeds for Gemma Stacey, who can get one back for Rock. 24 goals to 17. So Clark out of the centre to Stubbs, long feed, and it's a good one. Ferguson read it beautifully, she converts, and just like that, Monbulk extend the margin back out to 8 goals. Mybus laterally through the hands of Maguire. She sort of just knocks it on the end of Pastrana. Retreats to Henry. Assesses the options up ahead. Goes short to Mybus. Finds O'Kelly. Pops it over the top. Here is Pastrana. Stacey Whitworth. Cleverly done. Beautiful interception. She gets it off to Scott Thomas, who finds Wilson. Wilson looks around and gets it back to Scott Thomas. Presenting nicely with Stubbs. Looks at Clark, who eventually got it under her control. And she finds Perry Reid, who can extend this margin to 9 goals, and she does. Equal biggest lead of the game. Jamie Clark is the centre pass, so they could potentially push it out to 10 goals here, Monbulk. But not without turning it over. So Rock with an opportunity to get one back. Henry fires one into Mybus. And Whitworth again, although she doesn't take it cleanly, but it's okay because she knocked it onto Wilson. She got it to Clark. Here is Stubbs. Scott Thomas involved. Short one to Ferguson. Looks around. Wanted to go laterally, but went short to Stubbs. Stubbs this time. She goes back and does a nice job to Wilson. Ferguson. Stubbs. Reid. Oh, no, she's lost it and fallen straight to the hands of James. So Rock on the counter-attack. Ella James has got it again. Clark. Oh, no. It was a clever intercept. Unfortunately, Georgia Wilson was looking in the complete wrong direction, and the ball trickles out of play. Can you believe that? Mybus through hands, and gee, this is a calamity of errors at the moment. It is all happening here at Monbulk Recreation Reserve. So Pastrana tucked away at a tight corner. Wilson taken out of it. Stacey lines up the goal. And that's a disappointing result for Rock. She converted, but took too long. Scott Thomas doesn't keep it in. So it'll come back to Mitzi Henry. Henry wastes no time and did well to get it to O'Kelly. Comes back to O'Kelly, and now Mybus. Short feed to O'Kelly, who will get a look. And Lily O'Kelly does not convert, and Whitworth, another good interception. She's had a really good second quarter. Stubbs laterally to Wilson. She goes back to Stubbs. Stubbs out wide to Ferguson. Back to Stubbs. Ferguson again. Here is Clark. And a short feed is a good one to Ferguson. And eventually, Monbulk, in fact, extend that margin to 10 goals. It was hard work, but they got there. O'Kelly. Out wide, good one. O'Kelly. Laterally through the hands of Mybus. A bit of a falcon in the end, I think, as well. Completely disoriented to Stubbs. Oh, gee, Clark did well. That ball was flying into the next suburb if she didn't control that one. Mybus. Henry it was, sorry, in fact, O'Kelly. Back to Henry. Long one over the top. It's a good one too to Mybus. Here is Stacey. Comes all the way back. Needs to be kept in play by Maguire, and it is. She'll go short and back to Henry. O'Kelly made it work. Here is Pastrana. Couple of 1-2s, and eventually it falls under the control of O'Kelly. And Whitworth again. What a second quarter she's having. That's her 4th interception, I believe. Ferguson looks around. Comes out wide to Wilson. Scott Thomas. Wilson again is involved. Goes out wide. Finds Stubbs. Wilson again for about a 3rd time in this passage over the top to Ferguson, and she gets it to Reid. It's 11 goals of difference now, 28 goals to 17. They're really starting to run away with it now. McDowell, who's come back onto the court this time as centre, started as wing defence. Short one to Stubbs, and Perry Reid makes it 12 goals of difference. And they have really blitzed them in this second quarter, have the Hawks, after a pretty good fight in the first from Rock. It's just fallen apart a bit. Henry, Scott Thomas cut it up, but O'Kelly recovered. Mybus got up at the right time and collected it cleanly. Finds Stacey. Comes back, or tried to get it back to Pastrenia. Was unable to do so. Monbulk on the counter-attack. Ferguson goes out wide to McDowell. Stubbs. Ferguson again is involved. Wanted to go over the top, but just goes wide to Stubbs. Here is Reid. And Perry Reid eventually gets it under her control, and she makes it 13 goals of difference. McDowell, Stubbs, back to McDowell. Stubbs, Reid. Too good for Ella James, and she converts another goal. And this avalanche of goals from Monbulk continues. They are well and truly on top now. Mybus collected it nicely. Stacey, did she keep it in? She did, but it falls straight into the lap of Wilson. Or maybe she didn't. It'll come back to Paige Whitworth. Whitworth goes out wide. It's a good one to McDowell, who finds Scott Thomas. Looks at Wilson. That's where she goes. Short pass is a good one. Scott Thomas eventually got it under her control. Here is McDowell. Finds Ferguson. Back to Stubbs. McDowell. Short one again. Ferguson again is involved. Stubbs for about a third time in this passage. And Perry Reid again. No. So they've coughed it up. Here is Henry. Received it from James. Finds O'Kelly. Maguire eventually gets it under her control. Bit too hot for Mybus, and McDowell was right on the scene and waste no time. Scott Thomas again is involved. Long one from Ferguson. Maguire knocks it away, but ball's going to stay with Monbulk. So Ferguson with a throw in. Back to McDowell, right at the top of the goal circle. Ferguson, and a bit heavy-handed there from Leah Mybus. Ferguson. We'll have a look at the goals this time. Steph Ferguson converts another one. And they continue to extend this lead to Monbulk. So we start to near the end of this first half, and what's been a pretty dominant display so far from the Hawks. Stubbs, Ferguson. McDowell, Reid. And Perry Reid's got yet another goal. 32 to 17. O'Kelly. And it's knocked away. Scott Thomas right onto the scene. Pastrenia. Laterally to O'Kelly. Good feed. Stacey. Doesn't convert. Whitworth nearly snatched another one. But Stacey, oh sorry, not Stacey, in fact it's O'Shaughnessy who's come on. So she gets her first goal for the afternoon as the Rock captain. And gets an important one back for the Kangaroos. McDowell, long feed, and Perry Reid did well to make it work. Henry. Ferguson. Chips it back momentarily. Ferguson got it. Back out to 15 goals, 33 to 18. Mybus. Oh, beautifully done by Wilson. Fantastic. Stubbs, Ferguson and McDowell. Back to Stubbs. Oh, just too much on it. So a reprieve for the Rock defence. Ella James on the last one of defence. Just goes short to Henry. Gets it moving up the court, but straight into the hands. And here is Perry Reid again. Can make this 16 goals a difference. That's a new biggest lead of the game. 34 to 18. Goes out wide. Good one. again, Ferguson. Nicely done over the top to Perry Reid. And this is going to go Rock's way. It's Wella James. Does well enough. Falls for Pastrenia. She finds O'Kelly. Mybus. And O'Shaughnessy. Is that going to count? Don't think it does. That is half time. Here in the Rochelle Wines match of the round between Monbulk and Rock. And after a pretty tight first quarter, fair to say the Hawks have really run away with it in 34 goals to 19. It's Jade Maguire with the centre pass. Second half action underway, and she wastes no time to O'Kelly, so a few positional changes have been swung by both teams here. Whitworth keeps it in play and found McDowell. She goes short to Stubbs. Stubbs, Kelly, McDowell, Clark, who seems to have moved back into goal defence. Interesting one. Long and wide and cut up by Ella James. Nicely done. Courtney Davies back on court. Under the control of Henry. Much longer pass this time to Maguire, and she's put way too much on that one. And this will come back to Whitworth. Off to Clark, who's moved into goal defence. Goes out wide. Kelly, Clark. Stubbs, back to Clark. Laterally to Kelly. McDowell. Looked at Ferguson momentarily, but came back to Kelly. Stubbs, McDowell. Wants Reid and gets it to her. And Perry Reid does not convert. Ella James with a second interception of this quarter already. Mybus, who's moved back into wing defence. James, Henry. James eventually gets it under her control. It was a tough one. Mybus receives from Henry. Finds Davey. Here is O'Kelly. Goes out wide to Maguire. O'Shaughnessy called for it, and that's a good feed. Beautifully done to Davey. She converts. And Rock get the first goal of the second half, and they get it back to 14 goals the difference. So McDowell to Ferguson. Fakes. Finds Stubbs. Here is Reid. And Perry Reid pushes it back out to 15 goals the difference. 20 to 35. Maguire to O'Kelly. Through hands and straight into the lap of Paige Whitworth, who's had a pretty good game today, though. O'Shaughnessy just snatched it from her. Gets it back for the Kangaroos. O'Shaughnessy looks around. Maguire recovered it nicely. Here's O'Shaughnessy again. Will she line them up? She will. And beautifully done by O'Shaughnessy. It was really good defensive work. And she's rewarded with a much-deserved goal. McDowell. Ferguson. Long pass is a good one to Stubbs. And Ferguson. Plenty of room to work with. And she gets one right back for Monbulk and puts the margin back out to 15 goals. 21 to 36. Clark nearly. Mybus. Laterally to O'Kelly, long one, works out for Maguire and O'Shaughnessy. Really good work rate again from Izzy O'Shaughnessy. Really good start to this quarter for her. And gets it back to 14 goals the difference. McDowell, Ferguson, Stubbs, McDowell, Ferguson, Stubbs. Couple of 1-2s and eventually Steph Ferguson will get another look at goal and she converts 37 to 22. So back in the centre for Maguire. And I think Kelly's been pulled up for contact. Henry. Through hands, works out to O'Kelly. Gets it back to Maguire. Davey called for it. Went short to O'Shaughnessy, who lines up the goal again. And again, Izzy O'Shaughnessy converts. Ferguson. Good long feed to Reid. And she puts it away, gets it back out to 15 goals the difference, and a bit of a shootout to start off this third quarter. Goals are coming quite freely at the moment. Davey retreats to Mybus. She goes back to Henry. Henry puts him inside the attacking third to Maguire. Here is O'Shaughnessy again, looked at Davey. Little fake pass, and it worked out beautifully in the end to Maguire. And Davey gets one back for Rock. So back to 14 goals the difference. Can they get a few consecutively here, the Kangaroos? Cut this margin down. Ferguson, they're not going to be able to do that for the moment because Perry Reid's got it. Decides to go back to Ferguson, and she puts it straight back out to 15 goals the difference, 39 to 24. So they work it around. Stubbs. Short pass, good one. Ferguson to Stubbs. And here is Perry Reid. Beautifully done. And she converts. 16 goals the difference now. 24-40. Beautifully done over the top. Ferguson to Reid. Just got a bit of separation on James, and she converts another goal. And this is the biggest lead of the game now. 17 goals the difference. 24-41. O'Kelly. Good one to Maguire. She goes back to O'Kelly. O'Shaughnessy. Couldn't quite take it clean in the end. Nearly snatched by McDowell, but she's pulled up for contact. And here is O'Shaughnessy. And she gets one back for Rock. 25-41 is the score. Ferguson. McDowell. Stubbs. Ferguson wants it long, and it's going to work out in the end. Crumbed it like a small forward and puts it away. Henry. Looked at Mybus, but went further to Maguire, and that worked out pretty well. O'Shaughnessy will go back to Maguire. Davey decides to go for goal, and O'Shaughnessy, did she keep it in? No. 25-41. Clark up the court nicely to Stubbs. Comes back to Clark. Laterally to Kelly. She goes laterally to Clark. McDowell retreats to Clark, who's had it about 3 or 4 times in this passage. Ferguson. Stubbs. Back to Clark again, who's been very busy. Long pass is a good one to Ferguson. She goes back to McDowell. Short to Stubbs. Ferguson, little underground one, works out to Stubbs. So the Rock defenders are doing it pretty well at the moment, not allowing any shots at goal just yet. And eventually they win it back, but Ella James has coughed it straight up to Sophie Stubbs. She finds Reid. And here is Steph Ferguson. Ferguson converts. There we go. Gets one back for the Kangaroos. Oh, sorry, the Hawks, in fact. So 25-42 reads the scoreboard. Ferguson out wide to Stubbs. Good feed to Ferguson. And another short little feed is a good one to Perry Reid. And she extends the margin to 18 goals, 25-43. Back it comes. Henry. Clark got a hand in, and that's really nicely done. It worked out to Stubbs. Here is McDowell. Kelly got it under her control. Clark again is involved. Stubbs fires one in quickly to Ferguson, and that's a good feed. Perry Reid again on the end of one. James knocks it out of play, and it will stay with Monbulk as we just start to get a bit of wind here at Monbulk Recreation Reserve. And Perry Reid can make this a 19-goal difference, and she does. 25-44. Ferguson into the hands of Stubbs. Ferguson to the front. Got some contact from Henry. And Steph Ferguson cleverly creating a 2-1 against Ella James. And the margin's out to 20 goals now, 25-45. It's really getting away from the Kangaroos. Henry, long pass is a good one to Davey, and that's a good feed to O'Shaughnessy. He got the separation on Whitworth and eventually gets that one to roll in. 26-45. They get one back to Rock. McDowell, Ferguson to the front. Comes back to Clark. Gets it to McDowell. Laterally to Kelly, right at a measure at the edge of this attacking third. McDowell fires one to Ferguson, and Henry knocks it out of play. Ferguson gets it back to 20 goals a difference, 26-46. Comes out wide. O'Kelly, Davey, Henry, good strong hands. Maguire. And O'Shaughnessy had a really good third quarter, in fact. Really taking her opportunities when they've come. McDowell. Stubbs. Out wide to Ferguson. Reed got to the front, but it went all the way over to McDowell. Stubbs, short feed is a good one to Ferguson, and she converts. 47-27. O'Kelly, long one, good one to O'Shannessy. And Izzy O'Shannessy again will get a look, and again she will convert. 28-47. Stubbs, Ferguson, Stubbs, Stubbs, McDowell, Ferguson, Reed. Back to 20 goals of difference, 48-28. Been a strong performance from the Hawks today. O'Kelly, back to Mybus, back to O'Kelly. O'Shannessy couldn't quite control it that time. Feed just a little bit too hot. Whitworth out of defence to Kelly. Nicely done to Clark, who made it work in the end. Here is Ferguson up the court. Stubbs. Oh, there we go. Reed all on her own. Puts it away. 21 goals of difference. New biggest lead of the game. 49-28. Oh, Stubbs. I think the wind just got a little push on that one from McDowell. It's really picked up here at Monbulk. James looked at Henry but went short to Mybus. Mybus. Probably offloaded it just in time. Henry. Henry, long one. Works out in the end for Maguire. And here is Courtney Davey. Can she get one back for Rock? No, but O'Shannessy. Good rebound. And she does get one back for the Kangaroos. 29-49. So Maguire with a centre pass. Davey. Henry. Back to Davey. Short one to O'Kelly. And here is O'Shannessy again. Got it. 30-49. So out it goes to Stubbs. Straight to Ferguson. Over the top to Reed. And Perry Reed puts it away. Monbulk raised the bat for a half century. 50-30 as we start to near three-quarter time. Oh, beautifully cut off again. Whitworth, what a game she's had. McDowell looks around, goes back to Kelly. Here is Clark. Good long one over the top to McDowell and Reed. Finds another goal, so that's their 17th goal of the quarter. They got 17 in the first, 17 in the second, and now 17 in the third. And there's an opportunity to better that tally from the first two quarters here. Ferguson all the way over to Clark. Finds McDowell. Back to Clark. McDowell looks at Stubbs. Gets it to her. And she'll go long to Ferguson. And that's another good feed to Perry Reed. And she gets the 18th goal of this quarter. Out to 52 goals now and a 22-goal margin. As Grace Scott Thomas comes on to centre. So her first opportunity in the mid-court for today's game. Henry, long one is a good one. O'Kelly. O'Shannessy, well done. And she's got it, there we go. 31-52. Scott Thomas with their first centre pass for the day. Ferguson. Long lateral pass is a good one to Stubbs. She comes all the way back to Kelly. Stubbs, Ferguson, Reed. And there is another goal, 53-31. She's just dominating today, Perry Reed. Davey, back to Maguire. Looks at O'Kelly, and that's where she goes. O'Shannessy directed her to Davey, and then O'Shannessy ends up with it. And Izzy O'Shannessy, bang, puts it away. Not an easy shot at goal, but Izzy O'Shannessy made it look pretty easy. Kelly. Ferguson, Reed. And she gets another one, 54-32. Davey. Mybus. O'Kelly. Davey, again Izzy O'Shaughnessy. Oh, didn't quite get the goal. But you can count that one as a feed to Davey, who did convert and gets it back to 21 goals the difference. Mybus nearly cut it off, but couldn't complete the job. Ferguson over the top, and it works out for Scott Thomas. Ferguson calls for it back, but it'll come across to Reid, who converts yet another goal for today's game. Back to 22 goals the difference, 55 to 33. As we start to near three-quarter time, what's been a pretty high-scoring third quarter. Whitworth got a hand to it, trickles out of play. And Davey, good strong collect, puts it away, gets it back to 21 goals the difference, 55 to 34. Oh! Decent collision. Everyone seems to be fine. Stubbs, Ferguson, again another beautiful feed, and Perry Reid gets another goal. Again, back to 22 goals the difference, 56 to 34. Davey, back to Maguire. Does she go for O'Shaughnessy? Eventually she does, but not a very favourable feed. Good long pass, works out for Ferguson. Got a bit of contact from Henry. Kelly, Scott Thomas, Ferguson, and then Reid. And there's another goal. New biggest lead of the game. 57 to 34. It is 23 goals the difference the way of Monbulk. Stubbs. Long one to Ferguson. Goes back to Stubbs. Ferguson again is involved. Here is Scott Thomas. Stubbs. Not Stubbs, sorry, Ferguson. Here is Reid. And she converts. 24 goals the difference. 58 to 34. Just powering away here at Monbulk. Mybus. Whitworth, and that'll do us for three-quarter time here in the Rochford Wines match of the round, and Monbulk continue their dominance heading into the final change. And we are underway in the final quarter of Rochford Wines match of the round action. Monbulk 23 goals adrift heading into this final quarter. And you can make that 24. Perry Reid gets another goal. 58 to 34. So Mybus back into the centre, onto Pastrenia. Here is Henry. Mybus. Waits and eventually goes out wide to Pastrenia. Davey calls for it, and she had plenty of room to work with as well. And she gets another goal. So back to 23 goals the difference, 58 to 35. Stubbs. Long pass, good one. To Clark, who's back into the centre. And Steph Ferguson gets her first goal for the last quarter. And again extends the margin back out to 24 goals. Mybus, Pastrenia. Davey put too much on it. Nearly stayed in play for Rock, but didn't do so. So Whitworth looks at Scott Thomas, but then goes further ahead to Clark. Scott Thomas back to Whitworth. Scott Thomas again. On to Kelly. Looks at Stubbs, and that's where she goes. Ferguson called for it, but went further to Clark. Stubbs, is it a legal interception by Mybus? No. And Ferguson just pops it over the top for Reid, who makes it a 25 goal difference, 60 to 35. So Jamie Clark again with the centre pass. Here is Stubbs over the top to Ferguson. Laterally to Clark. And a good feed to Steph Ferguson, who positioned herself nicely and gets another goal. 26 goals the difference, 61 to 35. Short pass, good one. Pastrenia over the top. Mybus, O'Shaughnessy. O'Shaughnessy again. Pastrenia, O'Shaughnessy. Loads up and no, doesn't convert. And Whitworth again with another interception. Clark. Ferguson unsure where to go. Eventually goes back to Scott Thomas. Oh, sorry, that was Kelly. This is Kelly now. Scott Thomas. Stubbs. Ferguson back in the goal circle, and Reid. Good collection off the post. Back to Stubbs. She'll go back to Ferguson. And Steph Ferguson makes it 27 goals the difference, 62 to 35. And Monbulk continue on their merry way. Clark. Kelly. Ferguson. Long feed is a good one. Perry Reid And there's another one for the Hawks, 63 to 35. Mybus. Henry, long one. And the hand came in from Clark, and Whitworth has done well enough, and they're on the counter-attack again. Kelly out to Clark. Back to Scott Thomas. Clark again is involved, can go short to Stubbs, and that's where she goes. She'll go longer to Ferguson. Does she pop it over the top to Reed? She does. But she stepped out of play, and Rock get a reprieve. James onto Henry. Long one is a good one to Mybus. Mybus, she goes long again. Pastrenia collected it well. Here is O'Shaughnessy. She gets it back to Mybus. Davey calls for it, but it won't go to her. Anyone's ball to be won here, and Clark collected it cleanly. And they're on the counter-attack again. Here is Scott Thomas onto Ferguson. Looks around. She'll go back to Kelly. Stubbs. Clark. Stubbs. Longer one to Ferguson. She'll go back to Stubbs. Reed calls for it, but it goes to Ferguson. Now Perry Reed. Gets it under her control and converts another one. 29 goals the difference. And they're piling it onto the last quarter of Monbulk. Ferguson did well against Mybus. Lateral pass. Henry did well enough. Cuts it off. Mybus goes out wide to Maguire. She gets him inside the attacking third and did that to Davey. Mybus. Henry. Back to Mybus. Looks at O'Shaughnessy. That's where she goes. And she pops it over the top to Davey. It's a good feed. And Courtney Davey doesn't convert. And Whitworth again with an interception. Nearly in the double digits for interceptions today. It's Paige Whitworth. Scott Thomas. Kelly. Scott Thomas again to Stubbs. Wants to put him inside the attacking third, but she goes laterally. Kelly again is involved. Long one to Clark. Here is Ferguson as the wind picks up now at Monbulk. And here is Steph Ferguson. She can make this 30 goals the difference. And she does. 65 to 35. And they're just running away with it now, Monbulk. Mybus out of the centre to Pastrenia and then to Davey. She'll go back to Pastrenia. Will she go short to Mybus? No, retreats to Henry. Mybus is involved now, but Clark gets it away from her. And Monbulk again can counter-attack. Kelly can go short. No, she'll go a little bit further to Stubbs. Stubbs laterally to Scott Thomas. Sophie Stubbs again. Cut off beautifully, though, by James. Anyone's ball to be won here. Eventually it falls for Davey. O'Shaughnessy's come off. So Gemma Stacey is back on. Davey. And anyone's ball to be won here. And eventually Monbulk win out again. Whitworth. Clark gets it under her control eventually. Ferguson. Good long feed to Reed. Won't have a shot at goal. Perry Reed again. Makes it 31 goals the difference. 66 to 35. And Jamie Clark has another centre pass. She goes short to Stubbs. Oh, Ferguson gets it under her control. Stubbs looks around, finds Perry Reed, and she collects it beautifully in the one hand and makes it 32 goals the difference, 67 to 35. Mybus. What can she create out of the centre? She finds Pastrenia. Henry. Short one to Stacey, who's back on court. And just goes with a short feed to Davey. Although it is Gemma Stacey again, and she gets one back for the Kangaroos, 67 to 36. Clark laterally, good one to Kelly, who finds Ferguson. Stubbs got some contact there from Mybus. She wastes no time getting it back to Ferguson. Clark, Steph Ferguson again. Doesn't convert, but Perry Reed will and get it back out to 32 goals the difference, 68 to 36. Mybus to Pastrenia. All the way back to Maguire. Just fires in a bullet to Stacey, and that's another bullet and works out in the end. It's out of play off the hands of Monbulk, so a throw in from Stacey. Goes to Pastrenia. And she puts it up for Courtney Davey, who can get one back for the Kangaroos, and she does. 37 to 68. Stubbs, long one. It's a good one to Ferguson. And Henry, no. Would have been such a clever interception if that had come off. But it's not to be. Ferguson. Stubbs. Back to Ferguson. Henry knocks it away, but still going to stay with the Hawks. Monbulk. Through Ferguson, can bring it back into play. Stubbs, Ferguson. Steph Ferguson again. This time gets it back out to 32 goals the difference, 69 to 37. And the Hawks have really made a bit of a statement today. Pretty dominant victory. Pastrenia. Short one is a good one to Stacey. And she converts, 69 to 38. So Nicole McDowell back on court. And she's back into the centre. Ferguson goes back to Scott Thomas. She goes to Stubbs, and Mybus lose their footing, but she's okay. Ferguson, Reid. And that one going to trickle out of play. Oh no, that one's cut off. Pastrenia got it from Davey. Mybus feigned a bit of contact. I don't think anything really came though. Stacey all the way back to Maguire. Long pass is a good one to Pastrenia. And here is Stacey. And they get back-to-back goals of the Kangaroos, 39 to 69. So they can chip away at this margin a little bit, Rock, but probably not really going to do a whole lot for them in the grand scheme of things. Maguire, Stacey, back out to Mybus. Oh, beautifully done by Scott Thomas, cuts it off, and she gets them onto the counter-attack. Stubbs, laterally and inboard to McDowell, goes back to Stubbs, looks around, she'll go back to Scott Thomas, she can put him inside the attacking third, she holds off for the moment, goes out wide to Kelly, here is McDowell, now they're in the attacking third, they're back out and back in. And I think that's come off hands. Off Ella James. Ferguson goes back to Stubbs. Reid calls for it and she'll get it. And she puts the margin back out to 31 goals, 70 to 39. Stubbs nearly cut off, but Davey couldn't complete the job. McDowell all the way back to Scott Thomas. They work it around, so Georgia Wilson on court for the first time today. Comes in at wing defence. Ferguson, back to McDowell. Does she put it up for Reid or go short for Ferguson, who does just feed it over to Perry Reid, and she can put this back out to 32 goals the difference, and she does. So back to the equal biggest lead of the game, 71 to 39. And just a bit too hot from Lamb Ibis. Wilson, Scott Thomas, all the way across to McDowell, onto Ferguson, finds Stubbs, and Ferguson. And this for the biggest lead of the game, and she's got it, 33 goals the difference now, 72 to 39. Here is McDowell. Ferguson looks at Stubbs, but decides to go back to McDowell. Stubbs now, no, doesn't have it under control. It was legally done by Mybus. And Rock can counter-attack. Maguire wastes no time to Henry, onto Mybus. She goes back to Henry, back to Mybus. Davey called for it, but it goes short to Stacey. And Gemma Stacey gets one back for Rock. 72 to 40. So Leah Mybus for the centre pass. Goes back to Henry. Henry, long and too long. Doesn't work out in the end for Davey. So Clark, who's moved back into goalkeeper. So she's been all over the place today. Jamie Clark, goal defence, goalkeeper, centre mostly. Ferguson, Reid, got it. And Perry Reid pushes it back out to a 33 goal difference, 73 to 40. McDowell, Stubbs. Ferguson to McDowell. Short pass is a good one. Stubbs, Ferguson, Reid. 34 goals the difference, new biggest lead of the game, 74 to 40. As we start to near the end of this contest. And a really dominant display here by Monbulk. So out they go. Long pass. Cut off by Scott Thomas, no. Stays with the Kangaroos. Mybus. Short one to O'Shaughnessy. Oh, sorry, Stacey, in fact, is a good one. O'Kelly. No, Maguire, it was to Pastrenia. And, no, not going to work out in the end. So Monbulk on the counter-attack here. Wilson goes back to Stubbs. Stubbs short to Ferguson. Ferguson will go back to Stubbs. She goes laterally to Scott Thomas. Stubbs again is involved. Ferguson, well done. Very hot feed, but she made it work. And that's the new biggest lead of the game again. 35 goals the difference now, 75 to 40. So Nicole McDowell will centre pass duties. Ferguson to McDowell. And Reid can make it 36 goals a difference, maybe not. She does with the second opportunity, 76 to 40. Pastrenia, through hands. Is it stolen by McDowell? No, Mybus. Put way too much on that one. So Jamie Clark on the last line of defence to Scott Thomas, to McDowell, goes out wide, again to Clark. Scott Thomas finds McDowell. They weave their way through. Here is Ferguson, looks around, comes back to Scott Thomas. She goes to Stubbs, puts it up for Reid and thumped away there by James. So Ferguson with a throw in. We'll go back to Stubbs and she puts it up for Reid, who makes it 37 goals a difference, 77 to 40. And McDowell has the centre pass. Good one to Stubbs, long one to Ferguson, and here is Reid again, who's about to make it 38 goals a difference, and she does, 78 to 40. And this has really gotten away from Rock in the end. Mybus does pretty well to Pastrenia. Mybus will get it back. And trickles out of play. So a throw in for Stacey. Back to Mybus. And that'll do us in the Rochford Wines match of the round, and a dominant victory here by Monbulk today. Definitely trying to get back that